In today's video, we have a variety of NHL news to discuss, including a potential suspension. We have some news on the NHL waiver wire, plus we have some updated NHL trade rumors on the Taylor Hall situation, plus the Toronto Maple Leafs. We'll discuss all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news updates, and let's jump in here first with a couple of quick tidbits from the weekend. The Flyers rookie Joel Farabee might find himself in hot water with NHL player safety. He does have a hearing for a situation that occurred against the Winnipeg Jets on the weekend for a very late hit against forward Matthew Perreault. Now, had Perreault had the puck, this would have been a clean hit, but the hit was really late. The puck was long gone. He was given a 5-minute major for the situation, so that very well will be factored in. I don't really expect anything too major from this. Obviously, Farabee's pretty young in his NHL career, doesn't have a rap sheet. And based on the situation, I'm thinking probably going to get one game, definitely no more than two. But the hit was incredibly late. Farabee had himself quite a weekend. Of course, on the other game he had against the Minnesota Wild, he ended up in a fight against forward Marcus Foligno, and Foligno really had an opportunity where he could have really beat him quite badly, but he had to let up because Farabee was in a situation where he was kind of ducking and holding himself under. He was not doing well in the scrap at all. So he certainly had himself a very interesting weekend in his rookie season here. But Joel Farabee, I guess we'll find out probably later today. By the time this video is posted, it is possible we might have a result here from NHL player safety. So if you're not sure of the news, check the pinned comment down below and I'll let you know what the outcome was once that comes to be. If it doesn't come out until tomorrow, then we'll discuss it in tomorrow's video. Now, in other news on the NHL waiver wire, the Vancouver Canucks had placed forward Sven Baertschi on waivers yesterday, and he did clear. Now, Baertschi's been playing extremely well in the American Hockey League. Of course, found himself kind of a victim of the numbers game, a victim of his contract not really being favorable for what he's been able to do at the NHL level. So, unfortunately for Baertschi, he has not been able to be traded. The Canucks have tried on multiple occasions to find a new home for the forward, but have not been successful. Jim Benning's been trying to do what he can. He's been working with Baertschi and his agent to find him a new NHL home, but nothing has worked out. So they decided to put him on waivers to see if anybody would take him, basically for nothing, essentially, because they did not have to put him on waivers either, because he was still placed on waivers less than 30 days ago, so he was still eligible to be, called up or down in the NHL, AHL lineup without going through waivers again. But they just did that for the sake of seeing if somebody would claim him, and unfortunately, he had not been claimed. Baertschi at the AHL level this year has done very well, so we'll see if they can continue to find a trade for him and get him, a fresh start somewhere else where he might be able to get more of an opportunity at the NHL level. But the Canucks just have too much of a logjam, and with the contract he has this year and next over $3 million, it's just not quite favorable for what they would expect him and where they would place him in the lineup. So I guess we'll see. Now, in bigger news on the NHL waiver wire, LA Kings forward Ilya Kovalchuk has been placed on waivers for the purpose of being terminated. Now, as we discussed previously, the Kings have been trying to move Kovalchuk for some time. I let them know a few weeks back that he was going to be a healthy scratch for the foreseeable future. It would not be basically in their future plans and really wouldn't be in their lineup anytime soon. The team, along with Kovalchuk and his agent, have been trying to find a trade. Nothing's really come to be. Obviously, given the contract he has and the cap hit that comes with it, teams were just not willing to take that on. But obviously, given an opportunity here, he might be able to sign and get another opportunity as a free agent, which he will ultimately become shortly once he goes through the waivers process and the contract is officially terminated and off the books. Now, because his contract was an over 35 years of age contract, the Kings are not off the hook for his cap hit, so they still have to include that into their salary cap equation, but ultimately Kovalchuk is walking away from the contract, which is the only way they can terminate it. So his contract for the remainder of this year and next, he is forfeiting a fair bit of money. He's losing about $400K in income this year and about $4.25 million next year, which ultimately he's hoping to recoup, at least a big chunk of that through a new contract, which is hard to say exactly what he would be paid, but I'm sure it'll be a lot less than he was earning before, giving another opportunity. I know when he signed with LA, one team that was very interested was the Boston Bruins, another was the San Jose Sharks, so it'll be interesting to see where they can now get him for nothing as a free agent, if they might be able to sign him to a contract, even if it's for the rest of this year or maybe this year and next at a shorter term, less money. It very well might be something that they're more inclined to do, rather than make a trade and have to give up assets to be able to add another player, with all his experience to their roster. So I guess we'll see where Kovalchuk lands. I mean, really overall, if you take a look at last year and this year, he didn't do nearly as well as he did before, but his numbers are certainly not absolutely horrendous. But the game has changed a lot since he went to play in the KHL, and it's just not able to keep up like he used to. But he had 34 points in 64 games last year, and he had 9 points in 17 games this year. So I think to a degree he can still play with a lesser contract, smaller role. There might be a place for him. So I guess we'll see where the veteran lands. But I personally, based on past experience at least and past interest, those are the teams I would look for to possibly be interested. But I guess you never know. More suitors will likely come out of the woodwork here once all this becomes finalized and he's officially a free agent. Now, jumping over and taking a look here at the Toronto Maple Leafs, they did announce that defenseman Rasmus Sandin would be loaned to Team Sweden to attend the World Junior Championships, which will be a great experience for him. There was some concern they may change their mind after Tyson Barrie was hurt the other night, but they have decided to let him go, and they have called up Timothy Liljegren as well as Martin Marincin, who can hopefully fill in here, and maybe we'll see Timothy Liljegren finally get his first taste of NHL action here. The former first-round pick has been a little slower at developing and getting his opportunity at least. He's looked pretty decent in the American Hockey League, so we'll see how things go in that regard. But in regards to the trade rumors involving the Maple Leafs, they're going to have some tough decisions to make here. One, I guess, problem that's been a good problem in a way is that many players who have filled in during times of NHL injuries for their forward group, especially the guys that have come in to fill in, have done a pretty solid job, thus creating more players who have proven that they can play and contribute, which kind of creates a little bit of a roster issue having so many guys who can play. And there's been a lot of talk, obviously, that the Leafs want to bolster their backup goaltending as well as their defense situations heading into the playoffs. So there could be some players that might become a victim of the numbers game. The third line lately of Kerfoot, Engvall, and Mikheyev has certainly played pretty well. Other guys that have been out injured like Trevor Moore and Andreas Johnsson, and even Kasperi Kapanen really has, in a situation where he hasn't really been able to solidify himself in the top six. But that third line that's been playing well together now, you could put him back there, but you could break up a line that's playing well. You don't really see Kapanen playing in the fourth line. Not that they necessarily would want to trade him, but you can certainly see how other players' emergence as being good players might create a bit of a spot where it just doesn't make sense to keep him around. Maybe he could be a trade piece to help them land another piece that they need here. There's been some talk about a potential deal with the Edmonton Oilers. I'm not sure there's really a lot to that just as of yet. It's been mentioned numerous times the Oilers might be willing to trade from a position of strength, which is actually their blue line for a change, and maybe in exchange for another forward. So there's been some talk of maybe Adam Larsson being the defenseman to go to the Leafs in exchange for Kapanen. I don't necessarily think that would be a one-for-one trade. Of course, Larsson was involved in a one-for-one trade before, and I'm sure I don't need to fill you in on how that has worked out. But ultimately, that could happen again, or like I said, there likely would be other pieces involved. But, Kapanen very well would fit nicely in a top six role with the Oilers, so that's certainly a possibility. And having a steady defenseman like Larsson in the right situation with the Leafs could work out as well. Hard to say. I mean, they certainly need backup goaltending, and like I mentioned before, I think Georgiev in New York would be the guy they would really zero in on that might have the best chance to acquire for a decent price tag. So we'll see, but the Leafs certainly have proven this year that a lot of their younger forwards have certainly proven to be pretty solid, and it's created a good problem for them to have lots of depth and guys that they might be able to use as trade bait to fill in the holes on the other parts of the team. So we'll see what they do here, what Kyle Dubas decides to do. But right now they have a battle in front of them to get into the playoffs, and it would not be shocked to see Dubas be somewhat aggressive sometime in the near future. Not necessarily before the roster freeze, but well before the deadline, to make sure that they have every opportunity to win as many games as they can to make sure they're in the playoffs. Now, the latest updates on Taylor Hall, there's been some reports that the Florida Panthers might be out as of right now. It looks as though they were looking for multiple pieces from the Panthers, and the Panthers might have been more interested if a contract extension could be reached, and it's not looking like that's going to be a possibility. So for the price tag for being a rental, Pierre LeBrun of TSN is reporting now that the Panthers might be out, but could circle back. If the Devils don't get what they're looking for, the price tag could come down, and they might very well jump back in. I believe the Panthers had some of their prospects like Borgstrom and Heponiemi even sit out some games over the weekend as well when Taylor Hall was a healthy scratch, which certainly fueled a lot of speculation over the possibility of them being included. But the Panthers have plenty of other guys in their system that could be interesting, like Tippett and Denisenko, just to name a few others. Spencer Knight, a top goaltender as well. So they've got lots of assets that they could possibly use to acquire Hall. But of course, I can understand why they might want an extension in place and not just to use them as a rental. But it's still being reported that the Coyotes were expected to be the front runners, but about yet. Barrett Hayton and Victor Soderstrom, who would be their top 2 prospects, were not being included, which is kind of surprising. I'm not sure. Maybe that's why there is no deal, is maybe that's what New Jersey wanted and it wasn't happening. Maybe the Devils were looking to get a goaltender out of Arizona as well. They have 2 very capable ones, and maybe the Coyotes did not want to part with that as well. It's also believed that the defending champions, the St. Louis Blues, have been in the mix. You could look to prospects like Costin and Kyrou, possibly, or even Vince Dunn, to be included in a potential trade along with some other draft picks and whatnot. So those are the teams that are in the mix. The Avalanche, I wouldn't necessarily think are completely out. There hasn't been much talk about Montreal anymore. I'm not sure if they're really in the mix still at this point. It doesn't seem to be, but I guess there's always that stealth team that you don't really hear much about that kind of comes out at the 11th hour and surprises everybody with a great offer and lands a trade. So just because the teams we're talking about are the ones that are supposedly in the mix doesn't mean others are not. And of course, there's always the possibility of the Oilers trying to reunite with Taylor Hall, which I wouldn't completely rule out, but as I mentioned before, I'm not really sure it makes a ton of sense for what they need and for what they could give up. But I guess we'll see. There's been reports of Ken Holland inquiring as well. So we'll see how everything goes with Taylor Hall. I really thought, based on how the weekend started, we'd have a trade by now, but we still don't have one. So we'll see how long the Devils continue to have him out as a healthy scratch and when this deal will finally get done. Give me your best Taylor Hall mock trades and where you think it's going to end up down in the comments so we can discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.